Good morning, everybody. And the mic is working and everything. All right, cool. So delighted to be here. I'm the guy from New York. Quick backstory. I've had 7 careers so far. I describe myself as a nonlinear, multimodal careerist. But the one that I had that's germane to this conversation is I worked at IBM for 15 years. I just retired about 5 years ago. That's big blue parlance for when you leave the company. It was a fantastic experience. I joined just after Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess. And then I left just after IBM Watson beat the Jeopardy champions. I'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation. Again, excited about the potential of technology to influence business and culture. I speak and attend a lot of these kind of events, and to be honest, too often there's conversation about, or more conversation about sort of convolutional neural networks and deep learning and reinforcement learning and speeds and feeds and what we used to call at IBM and GORPy stuff. But I often have conversations with attendees who are like, well, what about the business stuff? How do I drive my business model with this kind of technology, right? So that's what I put together. It's actually 2 parts, a little bit about sort of backstory, how we got to now, paraphrasing Stephen Johnson's great book, and then some specific examples, some of which have been referenced so far, but I want to give you sort of data you can use, right? I'm a big fan of Peter Drucker, management consultant, right? Don't tell me you had a great meeting with me, tell me what you're going to do differently on Monday. So hopefully, after this talk, you'll have some ideas about how to do just that. Okay, historical perspective, why we're interested in AI now, who can help, and how to get started. Everybody know Andrew Ng? Show of hands? Okay, if you don't, please check him out on YouTube. I describe him as the Elvis Presley of AI. He's sort of the king of rock. He's like the seminal guru, current, mind leader, if you will. Incredible speaker. He has YouTube videos where he talks about sort of business values, Stanford professor. Just a great mind. His comment here is that AI is the new electricity, and just as electricity transformed industry and ultimately culture and business 100 years ago, AI is going to do the same kind of thing. It's going to impact every business no matter what you do. So that's sort of the context for big picture for this. Forward, wrong way, let's see. Let's see, going the right way? Here we go. So, important to keep in mind that AI is a constellation, right? It's not one thing. I often have people say, well, what's the most important thing about AI? I say, well, what if you went to a biologist and said, what's the most important thing about biology, the most important problem you're addressing? It's a constellation of things, everything from Google Home, right, to there's like 750 Power 9 servers in a refrigerated room that make up IBM Watson. So it's lots of stuff, hardware, software, deep learning devices, whatever. It's on your watch, it's in your phone, it's in your car, right? It's going to be in your shoes, in your clothing. So big picture perspective, right? Anybody know what this is? Any history buffs? Shout it out. Any idea? Okay, so this is the first analog computer. It's called the Antikythera mechanism. It was found in 150 feet of seawater off a Greek island. It's about 2,500 years old. It's described as the first analog computer. It could map the orbits of the 5 planets closest to the sun. It tracked Olympic cycles every 4 years. It mapped solar and lunar eclipses. They're not really sure who built it. They think Hippocrates, I think, who was a famous mathematician who lived on Rhodes, put it together. But the idea, again, for context, is we've been using machines, we humans, to solve problems, help us address issues related to science for, thousands of years. Probably not far from here, Charles Babbage put together a computer, never was built in his lifetime, but the difference engine, right? 8,000 moving parts that could do addition and subtraction, multiplication, division. Actually, they built a version about 150 years later. But he, again, looking to build a machine to help solve problems. This is the Dartmouth Conference, the workshop that was conducted in the summer of 1956 by John McCarthy, a famous computer scientist and mathematician, where the term artificial intelligence was first coined. So that's like 62 years ago or whatever. The first company to really focus on AI from a commercial perspective, if you will, was IBM. In 1996, they put together Deep Blue, which beat Garry Kasparov. Worth noting, though, that in 96 they had 5 matches and Kasparov won. But they tweaked and retooled Deep Blue at IBM Research and asked for a rematch, and a year later, they beat him pretty handily in New York. It was sort of a seminal moment in AI, machines that were smarter than humans. Now, granted, it's chess, but still. But 14 years later, IBM put together Watson, which basically crushed the 2 grand champions, Ken Jennings and Ben Rutter. Interesting note here, this is Ken Jennings. For one, I welcome our new computer overlords. That's from The Simpsons, right? So again, Watson was tweaked to do this and do it really well. Now, there's ongoing discussion about the value it's bringing to the market today. That's a sidebar conversation we should have. But needless to say, it was a pretty amazing accomplishment. I mean, it really did an amazing job of figuring out this parsing, that's the answer first and what's the question. Worth noting that Denis Hassabis's instance of AI, AlphaGo, which is now part of Google, right, beat the world champion Go player in March of 2017. Supposedly the number of possible moves in Go is equal to the number of atoms in the universe. That's what somebody said. I don't know if that's an accurate number. I think worth sidebar, this is a little digression I like to do with this slide. So this is an amazing piece of AI, right? An instance of machine learning. But as one of the data scientists involved at Google in this project said, while this is fantastic, my 6-year-old can tell you how Go relates to chess, the history of Go, why Go is different from other games, and this AI instance, as brilliant as it is, can do none of that. So just for perspective on where we are with AI. This is a really interesting instance. This AI instance called Libratus. It was built by a team at Carnegie Mellon, beat 5 professional poker players in a 20-game match. They said they could watch it learning. They could see it figuring out what they're doing. The compelling information about this is that it used what we call imperfect information. So it had no idea what cards the other players had, but it figured out somehow, based on logistics and probability, right, what the odds were that the cards they were holding were winning or not, and eventually beat them. So that's kind of implications for finance, for negotiation, for medical diagnoses. Again, using imperfect information, pretty exciting. So why is this happening now? Sort of 3 main factors I like to cite. So big data, and that's what we're going to talk about, why your brain's too small. The increasing power of algorithms and software tools writ large, and then hardware, right? I mean, our phones now have more power than what was on board the devices that took men to the moon in 1969. It was just amazing, right? So smaller, faster. Bernard referred to this earlier, but the amount of data that's been created is exponentially crazy. Predicting like 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. That's a pretty amazing number, right? Stand over here where I can see. 80% of it's unstructured, so it's no longer neatly tagged in SQL databases or DB2. It's like videos and tweets and other social media content and Instagram posts and sentiment kind of data. And the rate of data creation is like 16.3 zettabytes. So lots and lots of information. Talking about IoT and IIoT, right? The industrial Internet of Things, as sensors and actuators permeate culture, not alone business, but your clothes are talking to you, and your car, and your shoes, and your appliances. They all have IP addresses. They're generating data. It's more data than we can handle, than we can parse, right? So the good news is our little 3-pound glucose-driven onboard computer has got some help, and it's AI to the rescue. It allows us to collect and identify all this data, right, as it continues to grow. It allows us to analyze it, rationalize it, make sense of it, tease out information, and then it allows us to act on it, right? It gives us data points we can do something with from a business perspective, certainly, as well as culturally and socially. I mean, We're looking at the potential of AI to help us cure cancer, to manipulate the genome, to travel to other planets, become an extra planetary species. But this is sort of the good news about AI as compared to what your brain can manage, right? From a business perspective, there are a lot of these kinds of quotes, but I think this is kind of an interesting one, especially coming from the gentleman who runs eBay. But he's like, if you don't have an AI strategy, you're going to die in the world that's coming. I mean, you need, as a business owner, as a consultant, as a person in business today, you've got to figure out a way to embrace it and take advantage of it. Some examples, it's already in the enterprise. Again, the reference to John Deere. They're using it in manufacturing as well as in the harvesters that have GPS and iPads, and they're using it to direct where the devices go and sampling soil as they go and managing the crop yield. PayPal's using it. They're pointing algorithms at purchasing history for customers to see if there's any fraud that might be indicated by the data. Lots of examples. Walmart's using AI-enabled robots to monitor SKUs in warehouses and in stores, improving efficiency and productivity. The main sectors or verticals where this is happening, right? If you're in any of these, you probably are aware, but it's worth sort of teasing out. This is where AI is gaining traction from a business perspective, right? Certainly financial services. I was in a meeting in New York last year, actually with a gentleman who runs a big hedge fund, and he said he had just fired 100 analysts and hired 9 data scientists because he needs people who can collect and collect data that's orthogonal, that maybe doesn't make sense per se, but that could provide insight if connected, if value teased out of it. Certainly healthcare, there are already AI instances that can read radiology scans, x-rays, at a 98% rate, which is above what humans can do. Back-end processes, payer and payee systems, monitoring and managing, looking for fraud, looking for inconsistencies. Retail, tracking inventory, robots going around and looking at items. Also, from a retail perspective on the consumer side, what are people buying? What are they like? People who bought this, recommendation engines, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And manufacturing, the General Electric IoT, Industrial Internet of Things, they have systems set up that monitor manufacturing and make changes on the fly or stop the line if something's going wrong with generating a diesel engine or a jet engine or whatever. So again, using these tools in very real ways in business. So who can help? There are, in fact, lots of companies and solutions to help you get engaged and take advantage of this AI revolution. This is a bit of an eye chart, I apologize, but I pulled it from a webinar that Teradata had done. I encourage you to investigate them. They're a vendor, but they do very interesting webinars. They sort of break AI tools into 3 tranches, right? The 2 on the left are sort of vendor-owned models. The ones on the left are, software as a service, but delivered in very niche kinds of solutions. So image recognition, voice recognition, translation, operations, supply.ai. The middle tranche is around sort of cloud APIs where you provide the data, but they have tools that live in the cloud. You can sort of do it anywhere. And then the third one is sort of the big data. If you want to engage with Watson or TensorFlow, big libraries where you need a lot of data to really take advantage of it. But again, these are all, these companies exist. They're in business. They're looking for customers. I want to talk about sort of 4 categories. Again, more tactical about how you can get engaged. So starting with tools and libraries. I'm sure you're familiar with Amazon Web Services, right? AWS. They have lots of free services and free data that you can use to build models and run them and test them. The recognition and the Amazon Lex are free. Actually, the others have a slight fee. Now, that said, the disclaimer on Amazon recognition is they recently ran it against 28 congressmen in the U.S. and determined that they were criminals. So needless to say, the facial recognition aspect has a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done. But again, these are tools that are available. And these, worth noting too, these are sort of the 4 main use cases for early adopters, if you will, right? Image and video classification, speech recognition, natural language processing, and recommendation engines. So Google obviously has this open source libraries of all kinds of tools and models for research, and they have APIs for beginners to pros, to develop for web or desktop or mobile or cloud. And they're available to some of the customers, right? People think it's a good idea. They're using these tools. Another one you may or may not know of, H2O. They're based in New York. They have quite a large install base and also tools that connect with some of these open source tools. And most interesting to me is this driverless AI, so AI to do AI. So as we all have a sense, right, eventually AI will be writing code and tweaking code, and so this is AI writing AI models and building neural networks and doing reinforcement learning, teaching itself. Talk about vendors and partners. Again, I think sometimes people forget that there are actually companies that you can partner with, that you don't need to do it all in-house, but there are companies that offer, again, like the slide from Teradata, some niche solutions to big complex solutions. So narrative science, again, Bernard mentioned this company. You guys know Narrative Science? So it's an amazing company. They have something they call NLG, natural language generation. And their sort of mantra is that they want to take information that's available or understandable by a few people and make it understandable or usable by a lot of people. So for example, they take stuff like this, right? And they're talking like big spreadsheets with lots of data, thousands of cells, and they make it look like this. They're getting uptake in sports writing, right? Financial reports are being generated by these tools. There are a couple of tools in this space, but again, if you have data that you need to parse and turn into text and charts, they're a possible vendor or partner. Big impact in the legal space, right? The days of piles of papers and having paralegals go through and review and research are gone. If the data is tagged and identified, even remotely, with natural language processing, you can go in and do searches based on keywords and pull up data that can drive case preparation in a matter of seconds, as this woman said. Bots, right? We're all familiar with bots. Anyone see the duplex demo at Google I/O, right? Who saw that? Anybody seen that on YouTube? Yeah. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to check it out. They had this bot that made a hair appointment for a woman, a client. And I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty amazing. They have an example too of it making a reservation at a restaurant where the person on the other end of the phone isn't totally clear, what day it is or where they want to be, but this AI bot sort of got it sorted. So this company, Next IT, is building bots. If you need bots to support sort of call center, help desk kind of interaction, they have tools. They're working with Alaska Airways, Charter Communication. They have a recruiting tool they built for the US Army. A lot of focus on logistics, right? IBM and Maersk doing blockchain and AI. This company is sort of in a similar kind of space where they're providing cargo companies with AI analysis. It used to be all on paper, carnets, lots of different pieces owned by different parties. Now AI can sort of connect those dots, if you will, and drive a new level of productivity and efficiency in logistics and supply chain interaction. And of course, the startups, the unicorns. There are lots of companies that are, getting VC money and building out solutions. Many of these tend to be kind of more niche, right? So if you're looking to get into AI to predict cyber attacks, this company, Cylance. C3 IoT is focused on managing IoT data. Data collection and cleansing. This doesn't get a lot of press, but I think it's really interesting to note that there are companies that will clean your data, that will take your data and sort it and tag it and give it back to you. Some of these describe themselves as sort of white glove data handling. It's pretty cool, a way to get started. I once heard a consultant actually say that you need to get all your data lined up and cleaned and tagged and in the database before you can start with AI. Nonsense. Get started with whatever you have, augment it with data you can get from these sources. There also, it's worth noting, there are a lot of curated data sets that you can get access to, most of which are free. Some of these sites list like thousands of URLs of monitored and managed and curated data, ranging from speech to images to text, to medical, to government, to statistics, like sentiment data. So again, these are all companies that can give you ideas and tools and information to start building models to get your business underway. Some quick advice about how to get started. So pick a small project, focus on prediction or analysis. I think if you're, depending on how ambitious you are, start with the 4 sort of current use cases, if you will, because that's where there are a lot of tools, there's a lot of best practices and learnings you can exploit to get going. Identify a vendor software. Some of the companies that I mentioned might be able to help you. There are others. This is just a sample, right? A Google search with some specific criteria will pull up possible partners. And the idea is to make an existing application smarter, build, deploy, evaluate, adjust, just like we do with any other IT project, right? Build it, put it out there, see how it works, tweak it as you go. I think this is closing with this slide. Just keep this in mind if you're a business owner or in business or just helping a business, right? This is from Harvard Business Review. I think it's clear why you're all here. Over the next decade, AI won't replace managers, but managers who use AI will replace those who don't. So that's just a little, at the risk of being fear-mongering, that's what we're up against, right? So from one small brain to another, I hope this was valuable, and thanks very much for your time.